Hi, how you doing? Well, to sum it up, May was just an awful month. The first half of the month had colder than normal nighttime temperatures. Then we had snow on May long weekend for about 3 days. We had a snow. Then we finished off the month with extreme heat into the mid 30s. That's nearing 100 Fahrenheit. And wind, and more wind. We had more than a week of big wind out of the southeast. So after a month of extreme weather swings, I'm really happy to see the back end of May and hopefully a much nicer June rolling in. I'm recording this today on June 2nd, and a couple of nights ago was the full moon, so maybe it'll bring us a change of weather for the better. My name is Sharon and I garden in East Central Saskatchewan, Zone 3. Welcome to my Sask Garden. Notice anything in here? Yes, it's quite empty. Despite the weather, despite it all, I still managed to get the vegetable garden in and the flower containers planted. It was really difficult keeping all those little pots of plants watered in the heat and dryness that last week. You guys know what I'm talking about. Every time you turn around, that pot you just watered is dry again. Everything in my mind was much further off in the ground or in big pots of soil that held the moisture for more than a minute. We'll go out and take a look at the state of it all in just a minute, and we'll also just do a quick walk around the yard. And what I still have to plant are perennials, and the reason for that is my perennials are still breaking through, especially in the shady areas. So as usual, I leave those areas alone until about mid-June before I start working in them. I haven't even really weeded in there because I'm afraid of stepping on something that's just emerging. We'll take a quick look in there as well. But in the meantime, these pots of perennials will remain in their pots. I've already potted up some into larger containers, and we'll do a few more as well, especially these that are planted in what appears to be bark mulch. What the heck is this? This stuff holds moisture for like a minute. When I pot them up into something larger, I'll remove quite a bit of that bark and mix it up with some potting soil before repotting it. They also overfill the containers so much so that when you water, it really just doesn't even soak in. So we'll start in the veg garden, and then we'll go on to the rest of the yard. And so this is how the vegetable garden got planted. Now I know I go on about hoops and row cover a lot, but this is why. I'm not sure that I would have been able to get everything planted. The garden is in a very windy area of the yard. The wind is actually picking up again today from the southeast, and we're supposed to get showers and wind, strong wind again later today. So this helps me immensely to be able to control the climate just a little bit when we're dealing with that kind of weather. So I'm just going to uncover all the beds quick, and we'll take a little bit closer look at how everything is managing in this kind of weather. In this first 4 by 12 raised bed, I've mentioned before that this year I'm going to try growing all the melons in one bed. There are 2 honeydew, which are these first 2 plants right here. And then in the center, I have 2 Sureness watermelon. And here on the end, I have 2 early champ cantaloupe. Last year, I grew 3 cantaloupe and 3 honeydew in the same bed, and I had a pretty good harvest from that. So, throwing in a couple of watermelon into the mix and still sticking with 6 plants in this 4 by 12 raised bed, it still allowed me to keep all the vines within the bed and not have them trail over the bed onto the rocks very much. In the next bed, this is the bed with one of the beds where we've set up the cattle panel trellis. And so I've got some pole beans. I seeded some pole beans, and they are just poking up through the soil. And those are called purple peacock pole beans. And then I have 3 mashed potato squash in a row, and over on the end here, which will have their own trellising system, are cucumbers. Moving on to the next bed is in the center, 3 rows are garlic. They're all up, doing very well. And on the outsides, I've seeded rutabaga So there is a rutabaga seedling, and then beets is next, and then rutabaga and beets. And I did that thinking that I would pull the beets earlier than the rutabaga, giving the rutabaga more space after I pull the beets to grow on, since they will probably be able to stay in here for quite a long time. And I'm keeping this bed covered with fine netting, and that's to keep away the flea beetles and the cabbage moths from the turnip, because they are also in the cabbage family at the same time. Last year I had some trouble with the garlic, and it looked to me like it was the root maggot, which it comes from a fly. So I just thought that perhaps it would be helpful to keep that whole bed covered, and I planned it that way to be able to, have plants together that could benefit from the netting. And then just over here I have 3 butternut squashes planted in a row here, and then 2 delicata squashes right there, and they will hopefully grow up this cattle panel trellis. Our low last night was about 10 degrees, and underneath the row cover the temperature is about 16 under the soil temperature is about 16 under the row cover, so that's still doing pretty good. Opposite that is just another bed planted exactly the same way, but behind there are the strawberries. These again are Rowena strawberries that I started from seed, and they've taken very well in here. I now have them uncovered. I did have them covered for a little bit, mostly to provide shade during that extreme heat that we had. Also, we haven't had much for moisture at all, so you see I have drip watering set up, and we have been running the drip. Onto the tomato bed, it's doing well. The blue cups, before anybody asks, it's what they were growing in, and so they have their names on them. And so I just leave them there, so they're a good marker for the names. Now they're covered for now. Soon they will, once they get a little bit taller or reaching the top of the hoops, then I will be putting on tomato cages, extra large tomato cages, and growing them that way. And these are the extra large tomato cages that I use. And so far they have always provided very good support for either the indeterminate or the determinate tomatoes. In the front row or the south row right here, the first row, those are the determinates, and then at the back are the indeterminate. And just in front of the tomatoes I have a couple rows of carrots which are germinating, have germinated. I also have, you're going to notice, a lot of little baby weeds right here. This is henbit, and it is rampant throughout my raised beds, and that weed has been here forever. I've just come to sort of live with it, and I just try and weed it out before they set seed. That's basically how I try to manage it, just to stop it from getting any worse. In the beds where I don't disturb the soil too much, for example, in the squash bed, I really didn't disturb the soil too much. We just dug the holes. That was about it, and the rest of it was not disturbed. And there, the henbit seeds are not at the surface, and they haven't been brought to the surface, and they're not germinating. But in beds where I disturb the soil a lot, so for example in the carrot rows, or especially here in the onion bed, where this bed was actually tilled, and you can see how the henbit weed is, it's just going to be rampant through here. So I probably should get this one weeded sooner rather than later. Onion are doing well though. They've really perked up the last couple of days. During the heat, I did have them covered with shade cloth. because it was not long. It had not been too long since I planted them. The other thing that has helped a lot has been running the drip, watering a few times since they've been planted. And finally, this is the cabbage. So on this first row here is the tiara cabbage. I've spoken of that before, how much I like it. Here we have the caylette, growing nicely. I'm pretty happy with the way that has come along. I have 2 caylette here. Following that are 4 broccoli, also growing nicely. And not bolting at all. Again, you know, the heat needed to be managed for the cabbage crop, and so I did have shade cloth on top of this as well. And then these are the mini cabbages that I'm trying. One is green, one is purple. The green one is called Pixie, and the red one is called Red Express, and they're supposed to make small heads. And this looks like some sort of Halloween decoration, but I just didn't take the cover off. It's actually my salad bowls. I have 2 pots planted up here. So these salad bowls are planted in kind of a very protected corner in the southwest corner of the garden, where there are bushes and trees that will give it shade in the afternoon. And I just had them covered up like that, mostly for the wind. In the tomato cage are mini-me cucumbers, trying those this year. And then there's a variety of lettuces as well. There's dill and also the red shiso. It's growing so slowly, I'm not sure what it's going to do, but mostly I just wanted that for it's edible, and I wanted some color. As well as it's supposed to taste like cinnamon. So I haven't tasted it yet, but once it gets a little bigger, I'll pick a leaf or 2 and see how it is. And these are a pretty nifty thing, which I didn't know existed. They fit onto a 5-gallon pail, these little caps. They actually fit on very securely and just provide protection. These are my zucchini that are growing under there, but yeah, they kind of push on, and you know, the wind isn't going to push them off, which is really nice. And then they have these holes on top just to let some of the humidity and the heat out. When it's sunny, I did take them off, and you know, they're going to probably outgrow those little caps pretty quick. But I was you know, I bought them not knowing that they were going to fit on a 5-gallon pail, not even thinking of that. I was thinking of more in the garden, perhaps, you know, like over the squash or over the cucumbers, and they do come with these little metal stakes that you can, and holes in the rim somewhere. There's a hole in the rim right there where you can stake it down. It would be very easy to make another hole or 2 in that rim as well. But anyways, for $3 at Dollarama, I thought that was a pretty good little invention. Here are pots of lavender, not yet planted out. I haven't planted any of them out yet. And again, just waiting and deciding where I'm going to plant them. It will be somewhere in the rock garden area or gravel garden area. Here we have a few more things still waiting to be planted out. This is the only annual I have left to plant out, and that is the Acerina vine that's going in the backyard. Again, I'm still waiting for some stuff to pop up there just to make sure I'm not stepping on anything. Otherwise, there's primula. The primula seedlings are doing quite nice. There's the Thalictrum seedlings over there on the end, and these are foxglove seedlings. Of everything here, the foxglove is going to need to be planted out pretty quick because they are just in little cells, and I'm sure that they're getting filled up with roots. Here in the rock garden, everything is doing pretty good. I'm still missing a few plants. I believe I'm missing echinacea as well as the Goldstrom rudbeckia. I feel like they should be up by now. I know they are a little bit later to emerge, especially that Rudbeckia, I find for me is later to emerge, and I haven't seen it anywhere in the yard yet. So I am a little concerned about it, but again, I do have to consider the fact that it was not that long ago, it was snowing. So the ground has been cold for a long time. And I'll just point out a few things that are beginning to look really nice. This short bearded iris is just starting to come into bloom. All of the varieties of short bearded iris that I have are just coming into bloom. And the Virginia, as usual, is looking lovely. I do wish it would bloom for a lot longer than they do. You can see this one is already beginning to fade a little. The Boom Chocolata geranium is up and growing very nicely. I'm really happy with this perennial. So far it's done very well since I planted it 3 years ago. And on this little hill, there are a few things that I am missing. Sedum is gone. It was called Chocolate Ball Stone Crop. That's gone. This is back in black. It has returned again. It struggled after the first year, but it's returned again. This is a phlox, and it looks like this is a dianthus, and it does look like there's a little bit of growth coming from under there. One of the reasons why I don't take away the dead foliage too quickly, because you never know when it's going to pop up again. And this ajuga is a really good example. I thought this was all dead, but I now see this marble one in particular, this one. I now see a lot of it popping up, and I think it's going to cover this area again. And this dark one as well. I thought that was completely dead, but I see that it is starting to grow. So I think it's beneficial to wait for, middle of June before you are declaring something dead. Here is an unnamed iris that I have. I have actually 3 clumps of it. I love it, and I'm going to have to divide it this year, which is a great thing, because I sure wouldn't mind putting this in a few more areas and just repeat this. This is one of my favorites, is the Back to the Fuchsia Salvia, and that's coming up quite nicely. That's in the Color Spires series. I don't know what this is. I fear it might have been a penstemon, and I think that has not survived. I was digging around trying to find a tag, can't find it. Everything else, though, is looking good. Actually, even the ajuga is looking better here. It had a tougher year this year. Last year, when the snow came off, they looked absolutely perfect. They looked evergreen. There was no dieback whatsoever. This year was a different story. And I think one of the problems this year was we had a midwinter thaw, which created some water and ice underneath the snow. There was not the ground wasn't thawed yet, so there was an ice buildup at the crowns of plants. And I remember thinking at the time, I believe it was early February that we had that thaw, and I remember thinking at the time, oh, this is not going to be good for the perennials, because that has happened to me before, where we've had that midwinter thaw, and it just creates that kind of ice dam sort of thing right at the crown of the plant underneath the snow. And I'm chalking up the problem to that for anything that maybe has not survived the winter this winter. I did want to point out these Mohican viburnum are all in bloom. I have several planted here, as well as one in the front yard. These are such a great shrub. These are actually all rooted cuttings from the original shrub. Just toward the bottom, sometimes a branch will lay down and on the soil, and it air layers and creates a new shrub. I dug up several from the one shrub that I had, the original, and planted a bunch of these. And yeah, I quite like them. Mohican viburnum, and they are a tough shrub. They also come into bloom at the same time as all of the lilacs. The lilac hedge is about to burst into bloom, and they always look really pretty together. And as well, I think the Virginia always looks really nice along with it, because going into the gravel garden, everything survived quite well, except for 3 plants, and they were all the same plant, and that was the Sunsparkler Blue Elf Sedum. And I had 3 of them planted sort of just on the corners here of the beds of the planting areas, and all 3 died. Everything else is coming along quite well. This little hill here, this slope that leads up to the upper rock garden, that still needs work, so it still looks some, messy and a little bit weedy, and I still need to add plants in there. I added in some tall bearded iris here and there, and I probably will add more, only because I need to move some and divide some, and so I think they're going to enjoy this kind of little bit of a raised slope right in front of the foundation. This is the old foundation of my grandmother's house. That's what that little concrete wall is all about. At the very front here, just to provide a bit of a screen, I planted some Carl Forrester Calamagrostis grass. There's more iris. This is much of this is still a work in progress as well. And there's a lot of salvia planted in here, all of it from the Color Spire series. The salvia, again, the Color Spire series, I'm very impressed with it. I think it's a very strong plant. So far it seems the only one I don't have is the light blue and white kind of colored one. I don't have that one, and only because I don't really care for the color, but I do have all the rest, I think. And these are Millennium Allium. And this is a tall black sedum. It's called Night Embers. A few more short bearded iris. I have some chocolate type colored ones that I'm going to intermix in here now. And also I'm going to add more hens and chicks. They are loving it in here. This is the Spirea shrub. And I planted up the 2 baskets with Biddens or Bidens, the purple shamrock, and a coleus. And that's on either side of the arbor bench as well. We put out the hanging baskets, but the purple bell vine is not doing well. I don't know. Maybe it'll come. It still has some, good growth on the top of it, but these vines, they're drying up and looking very wimpy. That was a good trial. I'm not sure that I'd try it again. We'll see how it does throughout the season, though. And the bowls, you probably noticed. These 2 bowls is where I put some Mrs. Pollock variegated leaf geranium, as well as the portulaca or moss rose. There's one there, and it repeats just over here. I also didn't mention the Nepeta. This is cat's pajamas, catmint or Nepeta. It should be a sterile variety that will not reseed, and that's exactly what I want here. And I started some campanula from seed last year, and they have, really increased in size, looking very nice. I haven't found any seedlings yet, so I don't know if they seeded out, around itself, but I think it's looking really nice. Not all of them lived. I think I have 4 left, and I just can't remember how many I had originally. But overall, I'm loving the gravel garden. I love this addition. I love the neatness of it in particular, because it is a little bit different than a lot of, especially the backyard, which tends to, it's more shaded and it's kind of wild. But I've mentioned before that these kinds of plants, and That kind of gravelly, rocky topography has always interested me a lot. And although it's just regular soil underneath the gravel, and then the gravel basically acts as about a 3-inch, 2 to 3 inch mulch. As well, the plants that when I planted them, I mixed gravel into the soil as well, just for good sharp drainage. I really like it. I tend to come out here and sit on that bench quite often. I really like it. I just think that it's a novel idea, and it's not my idea particularly. I did look up gravel gardening before I started, and I watched some YouTube videos on it. It's not particularly rock gardening, but sand gardening, gravel gardening, and rubble gardening are gaining a lot of momentum and popularity in the UK in particular, because it is sustainable and it does use kind of a water-wise type of gardening approach. Just moving here to the front yard, this Thunderchild Rosy Bloom flowering crabapple tree is in full bloom. I don't know that there's a branch, perhaps there's 1 or 2 branches that actually don't have blooms, but it's really having a beautiful bloom this year. I'm afraid that the color doesn't quite show up on camera as it does in person, but it's just a beautiful shade of pink. Here is the dwarf mugo pine, and you can see all of the candles that are just beginning to form. That's going to look really pretty in not too long of a time, actually. I keep those candles trimmed off usually. I do let them go for a little while just so I can see the beauty of them. But if you need to control the size of your mugo pine, that is how you would do it, is by clipping off those just underneath those candles. And probably any time within the next month would be a good time to do it. Here we have the original Mohican viburnum, also in bloom. This is the south side of the house, and very dry here. I don't water these shrubs, and they just seem to survive the heat and the dryness very well. Next to it is Pocahontas lilac. Actually, I have 2 of those. Also do very well here. And then just in the center, in between the 2 lilacs, is a high bush cranberry. I really like high bush cranberry. I think it's an excellent shrub for a zone 2, zone 3 environment. It's also a very tough shrub. We added some wind screening temporarily to this little front deck that we have, and that's because on the other side of that black screening, I have all of my houseplants that are trying to harden off without getting battered by wind and too much sunshine. So those balcony type of screening materials are actually quite ideal for that kind of situation. We just zip tied it on, and we'll probably take it off within a few days. Just below it, though, I wanted to just talk about this area because I redid this a bit last year. And the reason I wanted to point it out is because this is where I planted 2 hydrangea last year. Now, this is the south side of the house, and I do have some concerns about that, but at the same time we do plan to set up drip watering here on a timer so that they will get plenty of water every 2nd or 3rd day, I'm thinking. So this is one, and the other is right here. This one not so nicely shaped. It had some broken branches. This one I have just a little half of a tomato cage on the bottom of it because it was kind of weak when I planted it. Seemed to have held up better. I waited until I saw where the leaves were coming, and then I pruned. I see that there is still a bit of dead branch above this set of leaves, and so I will just prune it just above that last set of leaves, this as well. But so far I'm happy. There's 2 spireas planted here as well. I'm quite hopeful for this. I'm hoping that it will take off and provide me lots of nice blooms. The spirea will bloom earlier than the hydrangea and a different color. So if that works, it's going to be pretty good. To fill in here, I have a whole bunch of autumn joy sedum starts, and that's what I plan to fill in the entire area with, is just the autumn joy. Eventually, I'd just like to continue it and replace the daylilies over to the left here, and just have autumn joy sedum everywhere. I do like the plant. I think it's an excellent plant, and it provides a long season of interest. We have a problem here where the deer feasted this winter on the cedar bushes, and we actually had to put the gate back up. We had had the gate off for a long time since our last dog left us, and we took the gate off, and we haven't put it back on until the deer were making their way into the backyard. So at least we were able to keep the deer out of the backyard for the most part. Just on the other side of the gate now, this is another shady area with pockets of midday sun, and you know, I'm still waiting for things to pop through. I'm still waiting for lots of hosta to pop through. I'm just barely seeing their tips now. What is doing well are all of the Martagon lilies. They are just one of my main things in my June garden, and provide a lot of greenery, a lot of nice looking greenery, and then of course the blooms that will be coming. But yeah, I'm still waiting for a lot. Just in this area, I had an awful lot of flooding. Just from the drain off from the roof, we had an awful lot of snow on the roof, on the garage roof this year. And as it melted and drained, it came this way. You know, so far I'm not seeing any sign of Brunnera or of Ligularia. So I don't know if they're slow. There is a lot of mulch on that bed, which perhaps I could pull off and help the plants along, help the soil warm up a little bit faster. But on this side, like I said, the Martagon lilies, as well as the primula. Here you can see the primula are all starting to bloom nicely, and the Martagon lilies are all sending up their buds. It's going to be a nice bloom here by the looks of it for the Martagons. Here is the sunny portion of the backyard. You can see perennials are all starting to poke up here in the sunny area. Lilies are all up, and daylilies are doing well. I have 2 tree peony. This one is doing very well, but this one just over behind me here to my right does have quite a bit of dead stems on it. I have been waiting to make sure that it is done pushing all the leaf buds before I go in and trim away the dead stems. I don't know what the difference is. They are 2 different types of tree peony. You know, aside from some dwarf bearded iris blooming, these are all look to be the purple color. But anyways, that's about the extent of what is actually blooming and providing color here, although the tree peony does have some nice leaf color as well. And we'll just take a quick stroll through the shadier area of the yard. Quite green, but very little color. Again, there's big patches of Martagon lily. Now, I didn't mention, I have mentioned in the past, but for those of you who perhaps haven't seen previous videos, I started these Martagon lilies from seed many years ago, and I have let them naturalize. I encourage seeding out. It does take a number of years for a Martagon lily to bloom from seed, probably 5 years or so before you'll see a bloom. But moving on, this is an area where, again, there's a bunch of Martagons, but it's also full of columbine. Some of the columbine foliage, some of the stuff that looks like columbine also is thalictrum. I do have quite a bit of that in these areas too. Something else that I encourage to seed out. This is all a very dark, almost black columbine. I did plant 3 others in here last year, or 5 others of different colors. So we'll have to, and I don't remember exactly where they were. They were the kurigami type of columbine. So we'll have to wait and see if they'll be blooming a different color for me. And again, more Martagons. There's peonies. This area now is slightly less shady and more dappled sun from the 2 willow trees, and this is the area I've been working on quite a bit over the last year or two, taking out trees in the background against the fence line because they were mostly chokecherry trees that had been full of black knot, and so they needed to be taken out, as well as there was a lot of weedy trees in there. We extended the border a bit here last year, and so it's definitely a work in progress. What you see that looks like a lot of grass is actually allium and allium seedlings. I thought I pulled out a lot last year, but I guess there's still a lot more to go. I don't mind. These are a purple sensation, and I don't mind allium. I don't really care for the yellow leaves when they start to bloom. They look like they sort of die at the same time they're blooming, but then very quickly after that they disappear completely. So in some ways I find that it's almost like a perfect perennial. And so basically this used to be a full sunbed at one point, and I have been working on changing all of that to plants that will tolerate more dappled shade or shade. Believe it or not, there's all kinds of hosta that are planted in here, but they have not yet poked, or they're just barely poking through. Like you can see right there, just barely getting going. So this is why I wait and wait for perennials to pop up. This heuchera, I'm glad to see made it. I do have a few that made it, and I have a few that I think didn't make it. I'm still waiting and going to take some sort of inventory when everything is done. And I did buy some more heuchera to try. That one is good. It's a variegated leaf Jacob's Ladder that I planted late last year. Happy to see that. And this is the pink spike bugbane that I was sure would not survive because it was so weak going into winter. But there it is, and looking quite nice. And so a number of the perennials that are waiting will be going into this area, including the foxglove. I'll pop them in here and there. I also added quite a bit of lady's mantle back here. I'm a big fan of the plant anyway, and it seems like it's going to be ideal conditions for lady's mantle. So I hope you enjoyed the little tour, and I hope the garden is progressing wherever you are as well. I know some of you are dealing with a great amount of rain, and I hope your gardens haven't been flooded out because of that. Anyways, thanks for taking the time to watch this video today. I do really appreciate it. I hope you did enjoy it. If you did, hit those buttons down there for me. Give me a thumbs up, a hype, and if you haven't yet, hit that subscribe button too. I hope you're doing well. See you soon.